So I want y'all to understand that I'm only probably going to get through the openings today. There may probably be times I will shut my camera off for obvious reasons. But first, I wanted to share. Hold on a second. I'm going to try to remember that I wasn't there yet for this. Okay. Uh, I came later on that week. All right. But I just want people to see. Hold on. Why can't I make this bigger? Bear with me. I want people to see this because I was trying to go through another part of their of the trial, and it's truly it's truly astounding. And I know that defense attorneys have a job to do. I get it. I personally couldn't do it. That's just me. And you're going to see how they try to put it all on Liz Ianellis. They blame the entire situation on Liz Ianellis. But I want people to see that this is the names of the deceased alumni. All right. I want people to understand that when they talk about it in the trial and they try to minimize the actions of the school, specifically the school and that man, because even though it was Paul on trial for the trafficking, there was a lot of stuff that also comes up into context. Okay. This is the list of deceased students, largely that have unalived themselves or died of overdoses. Okay. This list continues to grow. And the way that they minimize it in the trial is infuriating. It is infuriating. All right. We continue to add names to this list. It has not stopped. We do have really great resources, obviously, with the FBI to trauma counselors and stuff like that. So they've been, hi Mahalo, they've been really good at providing those resources for us, right? I also want to, so after Paul was arrested, right? The FBI set up a tip line and we were told to send them information, right? There's some confusion with the timeline in the actual trial. You'll see the beginning is the FBI agents that have been phenomenal. I could not ask for better investigators, but there were multiple investigations, right? And one of the witnesses is the first one of the first witnesses. Her name is Jankowicz, special agent. We call her by her first name, but she is a special agent. And they tried to ask her about other investigations, which, by the way, I just tried to FOIA the property, the family with New York State Police. They want $7,500 for that FOIA, which is just mind-blowing. But when the investigation started, it started with the state police, right? That's who had jurisdiction. Hancock police weren't doing anything because money, right? And I think that it's really unfortunate that with that type of money comes, I don't know, they're just able to do whatever the fuck they want. It's quite unfortunate, but it just seems to be the world that we live in. In fact, it wasn't until Paul's arrest that they even got the point of what we have been doing for 30 years, right? You have to remember that the victims were there in 95, 2000, and 2001, right? It's also important to note that other victims disclosed after Paul was arrested, and we were not able to do anything because of that nexus, right? And you're going to see that come up in special agents' testimony, because they try to say they try to say that Liz concocted this entire thing, and it was all this big conspiracy. But that was their defense. You'll see. And I'm so glad that I was not here at the trial physically for this, because I probably would have been really upset about it. Hold on a second. I'm trying to make this bigger because I screen recorded. Hold on. I screen recorded it thinking that it would be more easier to see. Hi, Florida Gray Lady. Y'all have always been so supportive, and we're so grateful for people that paid attention before this happens, right? Because for a really long time, it wasn't the fact that we weren't speaking. It was, they didn't believe us. They had, and you'll see, oh man, it was really difficult to watch when Liz Ianellis actually, took the stand, and how they tried to blame her. It was quite wild. I think that people need to understand what Liz Ianellis does for a profession. Okay. Liz Ianellis is a trauma therapist. So it was incredibly frustrating for us to sit in the courtroom while they tried to assassinate her character and say that pretty much she concocted this entire thing. You're going to see a lot of note about the Family School Truth Campaign, which is kind of where this started, right? And a normal person would be able to see it and be like, hey, the age of the internet came up. As the age of the internet came up and social media started expanding, we started getting on the internet and telling our stories, and that it's just that simple. But they push it all back on Liz Ianellis. And it's crazy, but you'll see. You might have to zoom in to these documents. This is before I got there. So we were told that the trial was going to last 3 weeks. So a lot of us thought we had time to get there. We did not. And you're going to see I marked up all over this. There are things that I want to bring in as I talk about it. But I just don't want people to, I never want to trigger people, and some of this does get super graphic. I know somebody asked me if I was going to present a lot of the evidence that was provided during the trial, and I thought about it, but you're also going to see that I edited a lot of victims' names. I understand that it's personal public information. It's just not something I'm going to do. I spoke to victim 2, and I did. I asked if she wanted me to edit, and she told me it didn't matter, that it was public record, but I chose to cover that. It's just something that it's a personal choice that I made consciously, because unfortunately there are some people that don't have boundaries. And one of the things that will make me get all the way out of character is somebody tracking these people down and bringing them into internet drama because you don't know what the fuck you're doing. All right. If they wanted to be a part of it, they would be a part of it. So this is just the people after Paul was convicted and they handcuffed him and they took him away. These agents, the state's attorneys, they cried with us, and there was no room in that courtroom. the last day, like as we were waiting for a verdict, it was standing room only. And that was a big part of the issue, right? Like we were told it was going to last 3 weeks. They got through the first week, and we were contacted saying that they expected to end by the end of the week. So we all had to like make arrangements because we thought we had time. That's where the GoFundMe came in. And it was, I know it's like a crazy thing to say, a beautiful thing, but it was so special to sit there, and every day that went on, there were more and more of us in the courtroom. And I just had a brief conversation with one of the agents that was the lead in this investigation because I was thinking about it while I was at work. That's why I was late, Eldon. I got in from work late. And I sent him. I had been thinking about it, just doing it, just doing it because I've been kind of dragging my feet for it for a while. And I sent him an email, and I can't imagine, the unimaginable things that they deal with in that line of work, right? And I sent him an email because I don't know. I just felt we've thanked him a million times, the one that I directly have a line of contact to. And I sent him an email because I know how it could feel like when you're doing, like when this stuff weighs you down. And I can't imagine being involved in that type of work where you're literally dealing with child abuse all day, every day. Like it's all you do. And I just wanted him like to know that I was thankful. For a really long time, we were gaslit and told that, our stories were not the truth. And you're going to see a lot of that in this trial. And I'm so grateful that the state's attorneys, they didn't allow it. They always came back with a response and kind of backed the witness into a corner. And I'm so grateful. And his response was, he said that he was thankful that he was a part of it. And it was a lot because that's kind of all we wanted, right? Like all we wanted was for them to say, you're right, we fucked up and we're fucking sorry and we're going to do better, right? Something along those lines. Granted, it's never going to happen. They're going to die on the hill that they were saving children's lives, right? But he acknowledged it. And that was, it's really, I know that like people might not see it as a big deal, but it is a very big deal that Paul Geer was convicted 30 years after his crime without a stitch of physical evidence. That is important. That means to me that the investigators, the state's attorneys, they did their job and they did it well. This, you're going to see her. She is the Jessica Carbone. She is this little petite, pretty, thing. And she is just fucking savage. I had no real care for the defense attorneys. I understand that they have a job to do. I truly understand that. But the way that they went after victims, it really turns me off. This Lisa Peebles, she was in the state's attorney. Hi, Janelle. She was retiring. This was actually going to be her last case. And I am confident that she's going to attempt to write a book about this because that's what she's done prior. The investigator for the defense was stalking the victims. In fact, as we were walking into the courtroom, I was with victim too. And as we were walking into the courtroom, he was there, and she kind of said something under her breath. And the way that he turned around and looked at her, it was just disgusting. All right. Gross. Um, he was stalking them. He was stalking their families, just real gross and like over the fucking boundaries of anything normal in an investigation. It was just gross all around. I just wanted to say something and I forgot what I was gonna say. Hi, Jay. Yeah. So I don't want if it's more important to me that this does not trigger people that then like it's a story that needs to be told because there are still so many kids in these types of programs, y'all. All right. And it blows my mind that there could be so much documentation on the internet, and yet a parent will still send their child there. I watched a screening of Liz's documentary a week or so ago. And if you don't know, the man in my photo is John Martin Crawford. And John Martin Crawford was they do there's a section of Liz's documentary where they talk about him, and it really he took his life in 2015, and he felt like he failed. Jonathan Martin Crawford was really involved in the Family School Truth Campaign, and when the school closed and there was no real accountability from any of the staff, no acknowledgement, just closed, he took that on his own shoulders. And I wish that he saw himself the way that most of us see him, because he truly was a hero, and he deserved to watch this, right? He was so ready. He wanted all of them to go down, all of them to pay, and he was like a front person, right? And I talked to him the night before, or maybe 2 nights before he died. We were talking about a different project that somebody made a documentary, and it was very similar to what we had gone through at the family. And we were talking about that, and he was just having a really hard time, and he wound up, he hung himself. And I think that when we lost John Martin Crawford, it was like a shock to my system, right? Because there were so many of us, right? Like Liz couldn't speak publicly. She was very involved always on the back end, but she couldn't speak publicly because at the time her job would have not been okay with it. She had a government job, and so she did a lot on the back end. And when John Martin Crawford died, Liz kind of came and just went full force publicly. And I wish that things would have been different, but hearing this fucking defense attorney minimize the amount of students that have died from overdoses or suicides, it just really bothered me. Of course, there are some names on that list that have died in like accidents, but it is a very small percentage. The majority of names on that list have died from overdoses and suicide. Knowing what we know about trauma and the long-term effects of trauma, it really, is it any wonder why some of us used until we legitimately couldn't use anymore? And I hate the way they minimize that. It really upsets me, because they mattered, and they deserved better. And the staff just refuses to validate that. They just kind of, well, it happened and we're all just gonna move on, and it's so frustrating to me. I gotta pull this up on my iPad so I could see the notes that I took. I did get through the second day, but there was a parent that testified, and I just want to go through it again to make sure that I have all the edits done that I want done. Hold on, let me pull it up so that I could see the notes that I took. Don't mind some of it's like, why can't I find my files? Y'all, this new iPad update, I don't fucking like it. I'm just going to be honest. Hold on. Okay. And that's what's so sad, Alden, is the deceptive marketing, right? That does come up in the trial. You're going to see it come up because they did have parents that testified, because they did think that the school was not what it was, and it's unfortunate, but that's just something else that those staff members have to deal with, is the fact that they manipulated, and it's not an easy journey for the children, like the kids that did, the kids that have done tours, right? There were alumni, students that gave tours, and we couldn't say anything. You couldn't tell them, don't fucking send your kid here, because you'd be punished. And I think that is a big part of those kids' process, right? I was always punished in the fucking corner. But a lot of these students, there were people that have had to restrain me, right? And they have come to me and apologized. In this trial, they make it seem as if kids were only restrained when they were violent, and that is not true. Kids were restrained for fucking anything. If you didn't listen, if you fucking spoke when you weren't supposed to speak, you were restrained. It wasn't just a protection, which is what they claim. It wasn't just a protection for staff and student safety. That's fucking horseshit. Okay. But this, hold on, because I screen recorded it because it was easier. Okay. Ms. Carbone, she's just amazing. They did a really good job, and you could see in, like, right out the gate, okay, this trial is about children who were preyed upon, children who were starved, children who were tortured, and children who were sexually abused. Okay, so even though the trial is about Paul's coercion and sexual assault, this comes in a lot, and that's why I don't want, this is probably going to be the most descriptive, and I don't want anybody to be triggered by that. So I prefer, if this stuff is sensitive for you, then just don't watch it. I'm trying to read it from the screen. God, I'm stupid, y'all. From 1992 until 2014, when it closed, the defendant worked as a choir director and teacher at the school called the Family Foundation School. All right. You're going to see in these, you see the abbreviation FFS. That's what they're talking about. You're going to see that often in the school. Whenever that's referenced, they're just abbreviating the name of the school. Now, the choir director is a really important part of this, okay? Because the school's choir was nationally known. They have won awards in other countries. So that was a really big moneymaker for the school, right? There are parents that sent their children to this school because of the choir. Therefore, administration was never going to get rid of Paul Geer. They were never going to do that because he brought money in. If they would have gotten rid of him, they wouldn't have had the chorus, right? It was a boarding school for troubled teens located in Hancock, New York, about 2 hours southwest of Albany, right near the Pennsylvania border. You're also going to see victim 2, also just for general purposes. Victim 1 and victim 3 are male. Victim 2 is a female. Victim 2 was taken to a retreat that the Family Foundation School had in Pennsylvania, and she was assaulted. Okay, so that retreat is going to come up often. It's called Starlight. If you see that, that's what they're referring to. Okay, I also took notes, but I wasn't here yet, so I couldn't have taken notes on things. I wasn't there. Hi, Joni. You will meet parents during this trial who sent their children to FFS. They will tell you that they believed it was a prestigious and challenging program which promised that by graduation day, their children would be polished adults. Okay. Ready to take on the world. They later learned in reality, FFS was a place where the defendant and others like him physically, mentally, emotionally, and sexually terrorized the children in their care. All right. The evidence in this case will show the defendant chose from that pool of troubled children that he thought would be easy targets, and he used the school's disciplinary actions to break them. Why is that important? Because he was also charged with 3 counts of coercion, right? Hi, JJ. So the state had to prove that he used these sanctions to break their will in order to then sexually assault them. Also important is victim number 1 has a history of sexual abuse. And when you get into the school, they do an intake, right? And a lot of that stuff is discussed. Is there prior sexual abuse? I don't want to say specifically, but he was assaulted at the hands of another well-known perpetrator of sexual assault, right? So, and Paul would be privy to that information as a family leader, right? And I think that that's an important part here as well, is because Paul was a family leader, he had direct access to sanctions, to anything, talking to our family, talking to other people. He controlled that as a family leader, all right? I'm sorry about that. The evidence in this case will show that the defendant chose from that pool of troubled children that he thought would be easy targets, and he used the school's disciplinary sanctions to break them. Once they were broken and had no choice but to bend to his will, he sexually abused them. Some children he sexually abused at the school. 3 children he sexually abused after transporting them over state lines. And that is why we were able to charge him. It wasn't the abuse in itself, because there were, I think it comes up in the trial, there were dozens more children, kids, adults, whatever you want to call us. There were dozens more students that disclosed after he was arrested. He wasn't able to be charged because they have to go according to what that statute of limitations is. And because they weren't taken across state lines, which is where the feds came in, he wouldn't be charged, right? That's what you see, my notes, that's what it says. That's why we're here, ladies and gentlemen. Those 3 children, we're gonna, whether their names are public or not, if you're just coming in, I'm choosing to leave them out. 1 and 3 are males. Victim number 2 is a female. The evidence will show that the defendant sexually assaulted victim 1 in Maine, that he sexually assaulted victim 2 in Pennsylvania, and that he sexually assaulted victim 3 in Toronto. This trial is about those 3 children and what the defendant, Paul Geer, did to them. You will meet those children, and others who went to FFS. They now have grown into adults, but they will tell you about that time at the school. They will tell you about the horrors that they endured at the hands of the defendant. They will tell you about something called table topics. Intense, volatile, abusive sessions where staff and other students would choose a child to target and then demean and destroy that child for as long as staff allows it. Sometimes hours, sometimes days, hurling accusations, peppering insults, prying open old wounds, exploiting known vulnerabilities or trauma. And this was a big one. My uncle, just trigger warning, my uncle shot himself in the head when I was 4, and they would use that against me, right? Any kinds of trauma that you had, instead of trying to nurture that trauma, right? Okay, or heal, right? They would instead use that trauma and exploit it and turn it against you. There were students that had lost parents, at this age, and they would say like really cruel things like, oh, your father would be pleased to know you're a whore, right? And it was sick, like as an adult, right? Looking back, and I say this a lot, like I would like to think that I would take the position that I do as far as protecting children anyway, but I also have to believe that it's part of my life experience. And because this is a part of my life experience, I believe that is what shaped me into as an adult, if that makes sense. Table topics, what could be, they could be brutal. And there's nothing that was off limits. All right. You will hear that the defendant was particularly fond of thrusting himself in front of the students and getting so close to their faces that they could see his spit and the sweat beating down his forehead. After table topics were over, staff would impose sanctions on the child who was targeted. Paul was you see, I put cheeseburger. He loved to tell us, now mind you, we're fucking minors, all right? He loved to tell us that he was such a sex addict that he would drive around town with porn magazines on his lap and a cheeseburger in his hand. There is something not normal about the fact that these conversations were highly inappropriate to be having in a room full of children. The defense is going to try to say that Paul emulated Tony, who was the owner of the school. And I'm going to say, were they similar? Yes. Okay. But did Paul do it because he was trying to appease Tony? Absolutely the fuck not. He did it because he's a predator. He did it because he got off on the power that he had over us. And I said that in my statement to the FBI that they read in the detention hearing. Okay. The former students and staff will explain that sanctions were basically punishments that FFS staff, including the defendant, imposed whenever they felt like it. See? They want you to believe that it was because we were being punished, but that is not always true. But these sanctions were not what we think of when we think of normal high school punishments. There was no detention, no community service, and no suspension. There was, you'll hear, starvation. Not being fed enough food at all, being forced to eat regurgitated or moldy food, getting only one plain can of tuna fish a day for weeks, days, or months at a time. We were often forced to eat foods that we were allergic to. If you were in isolation, which at the time when I was there, it was you were wrapped in a blanket with duct tape, and you were in a room that was off the boot closet, right? If you were in isolation, then you ate dry tuna fish. Sometimes you got mapo, sometimes you didn't. On an English muffin for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. All right. It was called the isolation diet. It just was what it was. Um, in order, let's say you were refusing to eat, you would have to, let's say I was in isolation and I was like, fuck this, I'm not eating that, right? Or I was whatever, I wasn't hungry because I was wrapped in a blanket with duct tape. They would stack those meals, right? Let's say you didn't eat breakfast, lunch, or dinner. They would stack breakfast, lunch, and dinner. And then when you got served breakfast the next day, you had to eat all of those meals in order to get out. Food is a motivator, right? And they used food. If you were overweight, they would put you on half portions. It wasn't, did not have a say in your diet. They did that for you. I've shown pictures of what I looked like when I was at the school. I was very overweight. My skin was terrible. But food was very frequently used as a tool. It wasn't what's the word? Like, it wasn't just a given, like a basic right, if you will. What up, Val Pal? There was forced manual labor, hauling cinder blocks everywhere you went around campus, loading buckets full of rocks, carrying them to another location only to dump them out and do the same thing again for days, weeks, months at a time. Digging your own grave was another one that was frequently used. And thank you. This is in Hancock, New York, y'all. I'm sure right now they have about 2 feet of snow. Okay. It didn't matter. It didn't matter if it was cold. Shoveling was a sanction. They would put you on that work sanction. Dish crew, trotting, double time. If they felt like you were too slow, they put you on a trotting sanction, and you would have to trot everywhere you went. If you were standing still, you'd have to trot in place. Shoveling just rocks from one point to another, just really like stuff that didn't really serve purposes except to try to get you to break down. There was blackouts. There's a couple of typos, and I think that this is supposed to say end exile. Okay. So blackout is when you are unable, like I was put on personal blackout with a couple of people because we had what was called negative contracts, right? Meaning, if you were plotting to run away with somebody, then you could be put on blackout with that person. Okay. There was a point that I was there that I was on blackout with a year and under, meaning I couldn't speak to students that hadn't been there for more than a year. Paul actually put me on blackout with boys when I was there for 3 days. So I did not talk to members of the opposite sex for the entirety of my stay. I stayed on blackout with boys until the day that I left that school. Exile was a little bit more serious. Exile means you spoke to no one. House blackout means you spoke to no one. Exile means that you are legitimately exiled from the student body. You eat alone, you sleep by everything. It's exactly what it means. There's also family blackout. I also like this. I just read this and it reminded me. I didn't speak to, I had siblings. My 2 brothers were alive then. They were born then. And I didn't speak to them the entirety of my stay. I wasn't even allowed to speak to my dad because my dad wasn't my primary parents. I had no relationships with any of my aunts and uncles, none of my cousins. It was very strict communication guidelines. All right. Family blackout was also a thing. When you first come in, you're put on family blackout. You can't contact anybody. And then that kind of goes away. But when you get sanctions, or if you're in the corner, you don't go to school, right? So imagine how parents felt when they're sending us here for education. My mom really just wanted me to get a high school education. And when I was in the corner, I didn't go to class. So if education is really the focus, why do you take that away? That's backwards. But if you're in family blackout, let's say if they felt like if they would use your family to punish you, essentially. When I was there, I got 1 5-minute phone call a week. It was on Wednesdays. I'll never forget that. Those phone calls were monitored, literally with somebody on the other end of a line while you were speaking to your family. And if you stepped out of line and said anything, they would just hang up. So it wasn't like they were just listening on one side of the conversation. They heard what your parents were saying as well. And those were typically done by a family, like by a senior member, meaning somebody that had been there for a while and followed the rules. The one that usually monitored my phone calls was my junior sponsor. Hi, Kathy. There was also isolation. You will hear that in the later days of the school, isolation was being locked into one of 2 small cell-like rooms that were created solely for that purpose, to trap and isolate children. You will see photos of these rooms during the trial. But in the early days of the school, you will hear that isolation was being physically bound, wrapped into a blanket or carpet, and duct taped in, unable to move, unable to use a bathroom, urinating and defecating in the blanket until staff decided that it was time to come out for days, hours, days, weeks at a time. Yeah, you can ask a question. So I think that the first time I got restrained and put in isolation, I wasn't there long. And my first stint in isolation was probably about 5 days. Again, you're in that blanket. There is no getting up. There is no getting out of that blanket for any reason. I think this is just not that it's right. But I think that the isolation rooms were a lot more of a humane thing, right? I mentioned in the beginning of this series that I took my son there when he was a baby, and I saw those isolation rooms, and I think that I would have rathered that. They could pull them out. So I didn't know until after that, but the parents were so snowed. I think that the entire time that I was there, I really only saw 1 student get pulled out because the parents were so manipulated, right? The parents were told that if we were telling them anything, that we were liars, right? We were just we are going to say anything to get them to bring us home. And that's kind of the stance that a lot of parents took. So my mom didn't understand until the Times article. When the first Times article came out, my mother, she was in shock at first because I had been telling her for years, but she didn't understand. And I think that when the first Times article came out, you got to remember the first article that ever was like in your face, it was the Sunday Times, and it was on the cover. And I think that when she saw it, she had her own process as well. Like I think the parents have to come to terms with the fact that they made a decision that ultimately wound up harming their kids more, right? And my mom was upset at first, but over time that turned into anger because I wasn't a scholarship student. My mother legitimately paid for me to go to this school and be abused because when you come out, you have, like, a lot of us did have prior traumas, and when you compound this type of trauma, then you just come out more fucked up than when you went in. And they also during the trial lie about this. They say that we were only in isolation for a day. That is a bold-faced lie. A bold-faced lie. Okay. These are just a few of the many, ladies and gentlemen, and these sanctions aren't the only one. I'm sorry, these students aren't the only ones that'll talk to you about the sanctions. During this trial, you'll meet staff who worked at FFS, and they will confirm that these took place. You will even hear the defendant himself confirm that he took part. During this trial, I expect you'll hear portions of sworn testimony that the defendant gave back in 2019. In that testimony, you'll hear him confirm that during table topics, he, quote, publicly shamed anyone with a sexual history of masturbation, that the tuna sanction was real, that blackout was real, that isolation was real, that students were rolled into carpets with duct tape. They do. The testimony does confirm. And what they're talking about is a deposition that was given like in 2018 or 2019, regarding one of the civil suits, because there were, when the New York Crime Victims Act opened up, the school had so many people file. And they do confirm that. They just stop. If I remember correctly, Paul stated he was a monster. Yeah. Those are his words. Okay. But this trial is not just about what was happening at FFS. It is about how the defendant used what was happening at FFS to coerce and sexually abuse children. So that was a big part of this, right? Is that they used these sanctions as a means to break the student. And I think that we've like learned that attack therapy is counterproductive. If anybody knows about like TTCs or any of it was proven counterproductive then. So why they continue to use it, I'll never understand. You will hear part of an interview that the FBI had with the defendant in 2024. In that interview, you will hear the defendant admit that his use of sanctions at FFS, especially the food sanctions, were indeed coercive. Crazy. Ladies and gentlemen, I told you that this trial is about 3 children and what the defendant did to them. Victim 1, victim 2, victim 3 will tell you that by virtue of his position at FFS, the defendant controlled every aspect of their lives. What they ate, when they ate, where they slept, if they slept, what they did, what sanctions were imposed, and importantly, what would happen if they didn't comply. That's a really important aspect of this, because there was no non-compliance. You either complied or they forced you to comply. That blank, blank, and blank, when you see that, that's the victims' names, will tell you that the defendant used that power and used those sanctions to wear them down, to break them, and he was successful. Once they were broken and had no choice but to bend to his will, the defendant sexually abused them. And he used the threat of those sanctions to do what he wanted, to take them over state lines and to abuse them there as well. All of the victims were also assaulted on property as well. But it's the across state lines thing that have that were the way he was able to be charged. And it's all Liz Ianellis' fault. She did it all. She's got the FBI. Y'all, it gets crazy. It truly does get crazy. Victim 1 will tell you he came to the Family Foundation School in 1993 after being sexually abused at prior schools and developing some behavioral issues as a result. Shortly after he started the school, the defendant began pulling him out of classes for one-on-one private voice lessons in the barn. Blank, victim 1, was sanctioned by the defendant regularly. The defendant isolated him. I do have a picture. I wonder if I could pull that up. Hold on a second, y'all. I appreciate you. Yeah, it's heavy, y'all. And I understand if people don't want to watch, right? I have a picture. I think it's a hard copy. I'm going to have to find it. So I don't have a picture of the isolation room, what it was, but I have a picture of the door. I got to find a way to show it, because one of the girls that I was there with is in front of that door. Obviously I didn't have a picture of the actual room, but I do have a picture of what's like the door, you know. Hold on, let me see. Victim 1 was bound into a rug and left in a boiler room. Victim 1 will tell you that in the summer of 1994, the defendant took him away from FFS. The defendant packed the two of them up in his car and drove to a remote cabin in the middle of Maine. You will hear the defendant confirm under oath that, from that 2019 testimony that he took Victim 1 on that trip to Maine. He does admit going on the trip. Paul did admit to going on the trip. You will hear the defendant admit, in quote, in hindsight, I shouldn't have done that. Victim 1 will tell you that once the defendant got him over state lines, the defendant's abuse started slowly. Getting them fast food, talking to him about girls that he liked, buying him pornographic magazines and beer. So that's the coercion aspect of it, right? Victim 1 will tell you that at first the defendant just masturbated in front of him, but before long, the defendant forced Victim 1 to engage in oral and manual sex acts in that cabin. On that trip, the defendant anally raped Victim 1, and he was 15 years old. Victim 2 will tell you that she came to FFS in early 2000 after this is the only female. The only female that he's charged with. There are other female victims. Victim 2 will tell you that she came to FFS in early 2000 after doing things like arguing with her parents, cutting class, and smoking marijuana. She spent about a year there. Shortly after she started at the school, the defendant began pulling her out of classes for one-on-one voice lessons in the barn. What the heck did that do? I'm sorry, I lost my place on my, because I'm reading it on my iPad. Victim 2 was sanctioned by the defendant regularly. She was forced to live in his basement. Now this I have a picture of. Okay. Hold on a second. Let me pull it up because when I got to the family, my first dorm was under Paul's house. Under a pedophile's house. They had girls living under the pedophile's house. All right. In my opinion, there was an allegation that had them move the boys. They moved us out and they put the boys in, and I don't think that made a difference. All right. So this is Paul's house on the property. If you see on the left, there is that little kind of not full to the top of the roof. It's just like the first floor. That was the dorm. That is the doorway to that dorm, right? This was about maybe it was right next to them before. I'm going back before the new school was built, right? That doorway was to a dorm, all right? That dorm changed from females to males and then back to females, all right? Nothing separating the pedophile from the students but a fucking door that he controlled, okay? He had access. Others didn't. Right. I know. I'm so grateful. I'm so grateful that they did what they could do to get it done. All right. So victim 2, okay, it shifted back. It went from females to males and then back to females. Okay. Victim 2 was sanctioned by the defendant regularly. She was forced to live in his basement. The defendant starved her. She will tell you that she lost 100 pounds during her time at FFS. Victim 2 will tell you that the defendant's sexual abuse started slowly, rubbing her breasts under the guise of vocal exercises, grabbing her buttocks when she was next to him at the piano. But before long, the defendant was regularly forcing victim 2 to engage in oral and manual sex acts at the school. Then one day, in the fall of 2000, the defendant took the choir on a trip to Pennsylvania for a performance. He made victim 2 leave early with him to help him set up. Victim 2 had to ride to Pennsylvania alone in a van with the defendant. This comes up. Victim 2 actually took the FBI back to the campus, and she directed them back to where she was assaulted. Right after they crossed over the state lines, the defendant pulled over. He showed victim 2 a convenience store bag that had gummy bears and soda inside. We didn't get stuff like that, right? So he's using these things that we would not have access to as a means to coerce her, okay? The defendant told victim 2 that if she wanted the food, she knew what she had to do. Then he unzipped his pants, exposed his penis, and waited. Victim 2 will tell you that she was starving, that she was so desperate for food after being starved by the defendant that she did what she had to do and performed oral sex on the defendant. Once the defendant was finished, he gave her the gummy bears and then went on his way. She was 17. Victim 3 came to the FFS in the fall of 2000 after some typical teenage behavior at school and at home. And this is, hi y'all, this was really frequent. There weren't a lot of us that were like so fucking out of line that we needed that type of stuff, right? It was really just typical teenage stuff. Of course, there was some that were like in real trouble with the law, but not the majority of us. Sorry. Victim 3 will tell you that his family coordinated with the school to have him taken from his bed and brought to FFS in shackles. It was very common for parents to hire escorts to take their kids out of whatever and bring them to the family. Shortly after he started at the school, the defendant forced victim 3 to join choir. The defendant was in charge of victim 3. He was sanctioned by him regularly. He was forced to carry cinder blocks around the campus everywhere he went. The defendant physically tortured him. Victim 3 will tell you that the defendant's sexual abuse started slowly. Comments about his body, offering restricted foods or reduced sanctions, but before long, the defendant was regularly forcing victim 3 to engage in oral and manual sex acts at the school. In April of 2001, the defendant brought victim 3 and the rest of the choir to Toronto to compete in a choral competition. You will see photos and documentation from that trip to Toronto. You will even see a video of the defendant conducting victim 3 and the rest of the choir during that trip. Victim 3 will tell you that on that trip, all the students and staff stayed at a hotel, and victim 3 was not allowed to have a key to his hotel room, but the defendant was. During the trip, the defendant told victim 3 that they had to go to his room, and once they were there, the defendant locked the door behind him. Victim 3 will tell you that the defendant attempted to anally rape him that day. But when the defendant could not maintain an erection, he forced victim 3 to perform oral sex on him instead. Victim 3 was 16 years old. The evidence will show that this abuse by the defendant was no anomaly. While victim 1, victim 2, and victim 3 may be the only students that the defendant transported over state lines to abuse, they are not the only students at FFS that the defendant sexually abused. During this trial, you will meet victim 1, victim 2, and victim 3. I'm sorry. No. That these are people that, let me back up a second. These are other victims. These were other victims that testified that he was not charged for. During this trial, you will meet blank, blank, and blank, 2 former FFS students who will tell you the same thing. The sanctions, the tormenting, the one-on-one private voice lessons in the barn, the sexual abuse. For, you see her initials there. It was in the late 90s after the defendant had abused victim one. And for blank, it was the late 2000s after the defendant had abused victim one and victim two. The defendant's patterns and behaviors will make sense to you. You're also going to meet supervisory special agent with the FBI's behavioral analysis unit. The supervisory special agent does not know anything about the defendant or what happens at the FFS, but he does know about childhood sexual assault and a process called grooming. He will tell you that abusers often start their abuse slowly, identifying targets, filling needs, exploiting vulnerabilities, and that they might give children gifts or other prohibited items, that they gradually increase sexual talk or touch until they are emboldened to abuse. The same behaviors you will hear the defendant's victims talk about in this trial. The supervisory special agent will also talk to you about the impact that this sort of childhood trauma has on children, even well into adulthood. Trust issues, relationship issues, holding shame, guilt, or confusion. I expect that you will see the impact of child sexual abuse during this trial in the survivors that testify in front of you. The children at FFS were not perfect children back then, and the evidence will show that that is exactly why the defendant targeted him. You will see that those children grew into adults who also aren't perfect, and the evidence will show that that is because of what the defendant did to them. The evidence will show that this is who the defendant really is. Oh, I appreciate you warming up. In fact, you will hear the defendant himself tell you. You will hear him admit in that 2019 testimony that he told children at FFS that he was a sex addict, that he talked constantly with those children about his own masturbation habits, that he questioned them constantly about their masturbation habits, that he made these children discuss their sexual proclivities. Children. These were the defendant's topics of choice with the children at FFS. You will hear him admit in that testimony that he was a monster. Ladies and gentlemen, this trial is about children and what the defendant, Paul Geer, did to them. In counts 1 and 2, what he did to victim 1. In counts 2 and 3, in counts 1 and 2, what he did to victim 1. In counts 3 and 4, what he did to victim 2. And in counts 5 and 6, what he did to victim 3. A few moments ago, the judge told you the charges, and she told you that at the end of this trial, she will give you the law as it applies to those charges. But this case will ultimately come down to two questions. First, did the defendant transport victim 1, victim 2, and victim 3 over state lines with the intent to sexually abuse them? And second, did the defendant use his position of authority at FFS and his ability to impose the school sanctions to coerce victim 1, 2, and 3 to do as he wished? After you meet victim 1, victim 2, and victim 3 and listen to all of the other testimony in this case, you will know exactly what the defendant did. You will know that the answer to both of those questions is yes, and we will ask that you return the only verdict consistent with that: guilty. Thank you. This, y'all, you see the difference in my notes? You see the difference in my notes. That's crazy. Okay. This is going to really make me angry, right? Ms. Peebles, we are real human beings. And I don't know why or how, but this was not it. Revenge. But disproportionate revenge by revisionist history. That's what this case is about. A handful of unhappy alumni from the Family Foundation School began a smear campaign against the school and disguised it as a truth campaign, and this thing has taken off like a Learjet on social media. First of all, it's not a fucking handful. It's damn near every fucking student over decades. We don't all speak to each other. All of us were from different eras where things were very fucking different. A few disgruntled alumni from the Family Foundation School wanted media attention about how the school failed them or how they went through some mental abuse. Then it exploded into this recruitment weapon to engage in all-out warfare against the facility at the Family Foundation School. They labeled themselves the Wolf Pack, the Survivors, the Avengers. I'm pretty sure that we would have rathered not be fucking tortured by a group of adults that were charged with fucking helping us. Okay? I'm pretty sure that we would rather go back in time and take that fucking experience completely out of our lives. This isn't even about an eye for an eye. They want off with their heads. They want their heads for an eye, but especially Paul Geer. They want to drill a stake through his heart, but to do that, they have to grossly exaggerate the conditions of the school and lie about sexual abuse allegations. But as always, there are two sides to every story, and the vast majority of alumni from the Family Foundation School appreciated what the school did for them. Bullshit. That is a flat out fucking lie. Okay? The majority of us do not appreciate any of it. That is a fucking lie. They're not hateful. They're grateful. They believe that the school changed their lives. So first of all, okay, there is a very clear difference in what you hear me talk about different eras, right? There's a very big difference of what the kids in the 80s and 90s went through than what the kids in the early 2000s and 2010s went through. All right. As the school was being investigated, they tried to change some fucking inhumane policies and procedures, okay? That doesn't mean that it was right. I think that that's pretty fucking clear that anybody could go on fucking Facebook and see the difference in the groups where the grateful members of the Family Foundation School is a lot smaller than the one that most of us are in. That is a crock of shit. I appreciate you. I'm sorry. This pisses me the fuck off. Nothing new though, right? Because we've been listening to this same fucking narrative for the last 20 years. How did the Family Foundation start? You will hear Tony and Betty Argyros, husband and wife, moved from New York City to Hancock, New York. They bought a house and they started taking in adults who were struggling with addiction issues. They brought them into their home. It was a pure act of kindness, and people got word of it. The number of people going into their home grew. So the idea came up, why don't we open a school for wayward adolescents and incorporate a therapeutic environment for them? Tony and Betty, Betty is still alive, by the way. Tony and Betty came from a place called Eastridge. All right. And Eastridge is where the the idea of the family school started. All right. East Ridge program, All Addicts Anonymous, was based off of Synanon, which was a fucking cult. Some call it the most violent cult. Okay. So no. It did start with adults, you're right. But then what happened? Greed. And I say this a lot. I do think that people get involved in these types of things. Treatment is another one, like drug rehab treatment. I believe that people may get involved with them for the right reasons, but somewhere along the line, greed picks up. And then it gets just out of control. You can't go back. Okay. They bought a piece of property in Hancock, New York in 1987, and they started the Family Foundation School, and they incorporated, I'm sorry, I lost my place, the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous, but they didn't apply it to just drug and alcohol addiction. They were applying it to any problem that the teenagers were bringing with them into the program. All Addicts Anonymous, Eastridge, and Synanon. Okay. There's a lot of research there as far as Synanon goes, if you don't know, but it is a cult. It is a cult. Crazy. The 4 principles that they espoused: honesty, purity, unselfishness, and love. Those were the 4 principles that they were, I think about this a lot, actually, because they did. They tried to drill this and personal accountability and inventory into us, right? But we're here pretty much begging for y'all to take your fucking inventory, and you continue to believe that you were doing the right thing. And that just blows my mind. It blows my mind. How strong is your program? Just wondering. Some of y'all have fucking 40, 50 years sober, clean, whatever. But child abuse. Because even outside of the sexual abuse allegation, okay, y'all committed child abuse. I know of no program that expects people, you can't live dirty and live a clean life. And y'all are going to have to answer for that shit eventually. Some of y'all devout Catholics just turn a blind eye to child abuse. Wild. They sure did. I'm sorry, I just lost my place. Early on, there were about 20 to 25 students at the school, but by the 2000s, early 2000s, it mushroomed into more than 200 students attending the school, and that spoke to the success of the program and what the participants were getting from this program. No, Miss Beebles. There were educational consultants that were paid to send us there. Okay. So I don't know what kind of investigation your investigator did. They didn't find that. They didn't find that there was educational consultants and caseworkers in psych hospitals and such that were putting kids into the family because they were being fucking paid to do it. You didn't know that? I guess it just doesn't fit what you want it to be. Most of the teenagers did not want to go to this school. They were forced to go to this school. They didn't go voluntarily. And not surprising, because when they were home, they were doing what they wanted whenever they wanted. And when they went to the school, they had rules and there were requirements that they had to follow. I promise you, we wouldn't have given a fuck about rules. We cared about the fact that we were being fucking abused. The administration used a tough love approach. And the staff did the best they could to handle the often very difficult and complicated issues that these students brought with them to the school. The students that attended the Family Foundation School were from well-to-do upper middle-class families. Their parents were doctors, lawyers, entertainers. Famous people sent their kids there. These teenagers had resources. They had communication. They had connections. They had voices. Excuse me? These were not underprivileged kids that were marginalized students that were sent to this school. So just because we come or came from upper middle class families, that means that the treatment that we got from this place was fucking appropriate. Like, how do you even say that when it comes to fucking child abuse? Wild. You see at the bottom what I wrote. If we were so bad, why were we encouraged to lie on our dishonesty list? When we first got to the school, okay, we weren't allowed to see our parents for the first 30 days. And at that point in time, we were encouraged to lie on our dishonesty list. That when the first time we saw our parents after that period of family blackout, we had to read that list out loud. If we were so bad, why did they have us lie? No, I'm just wondering. Or did you not know that they told us to lie? That we would write our dishonesty list and hand it to the counselor, and they would look at it and tap and say, but are you sure that you don't do drugs? There were children at this school that had never touched drugs or alcohol in their entire lives. And they were told to tell their parents that they were shooting fucking heroin between their toes. Why? Because that just cements our stay. Because after the parents walk away from that family meeting, they're like, shit, my kid really does need to be here. I don't think you know very much about the situation, Miss Beebles. It was a strict, rigorous program, and a range of issues that the teenagers suffered with varied from drug addiction, alcoholism, drug dealers, gang members, violence, mental health issues. Most of them had some sort of mental health issue. Many were pathological liars. The irony. Many were reported to have been promiscuous. And again, it was a strict, rigorous program, and the school was designed to help these kids graduate from school and be successful in adulthood. What is your definition of success, Ms. Peebles? I would imagine it's not suicide or a lifelong drug addiction to stop the fucking nightmares of the trauma that you have from this school. I would imagine that's not success. And the school used to, tote this success rate, okay? John Martin Crawford told y'all in 2008? That it was not accurate. The truth, when we get out of that place, we're so fucking mentally fucked up that we don't socialize correctly, okay? 90% of us wind up relapsing. It's not until 5-7 years after we leave that we even begin to start to process and unpack what the fuck they did to us. When I ran away, when I got sent to the family, I was friends with the same girls since I was 10. We're still friends, actually, today. One of them was just in my TikTok live the other day. Okay? She was my best friend. They picked me up at Port Authority when I ran away, and they walked right past me. They didn't even recognize me. You don't understand that most of us just shoved it down, right? Like we weren't ready to deal with it. We didn't want to deal with it. So that came with a lot of people, substance use. The success rate that this school talked about was off. You don't even want to talk about the lifelong consequences that we have with people in relationships because of the way that we were treated. You don't know much about trauma and addiction, clearly. Sorry. The parents viewed this as a last resort. I know, call me fucking crazy. God forbid there was some fucking therapy, right? God forbid there was any of that. Do you think, I think this all the time. I wonder what the outcome would have been if we were given the therapy or attended the program that our fucking parents paid for us to be in. Crazy. The parents viewed this as a last resort. They were at the ends of their ropes with their sons and daughters. They were fearful that their kids were going to wind up in prison, homeless, or dead. They were hoping the school was going to come through for them because, again, they were at the ends of their rope. So just really quickly, the school exploited and took advantage of that. just so you're aware. And guess what? Some of us wound up dead anyway. The school exploited the parents' need or drilled it in the parents' head that if they did not send us to this fucking school, that we were going to wind up dead. One mother, one of the girls that I was there with, she killed herself. She was a nurse. And she killed herself with IV fentanyl. Her sister also died in a car accident on her way back to the family school. Her and three students were on a home visit, and on their way back to the family, they crashed and hit a tree. That mother lost 2 daughters. Now let's talk about Paul Geer's role. In 1992, Paul was 24 years old. He was performing at a local church choir. Tony and Betty Argero saw his young talent when they were at the church. They approached him immediately and asked if he would be willing to teach or direct that choir program, and he agreed. They also hired him to teach English and history early on. No license, no qualification. You meet a sex addict in a fucking church teaching choir, and you ask him to teach us. Crazy. Maybe try hiring teachers with like a fucking degree. Call me crazy. Paul was not familiar with the 12-step program, nor did he ever get trained on how to deal with the sometimes often serious psychological issues that kids brought with them to this program. Not knowing how to navigate this foreign territory, he modeled himself after Tony Argeros, the founder of the school, the man who hired him. Tony Argeros was a self-proclaimed sex addict. Tony was a yeller and screamer. Paul took on the persona of a sex addict. Paul began yelling and screaming. Tony would say, "Yell." Paul would say, "How loud?" Paul didn't create the school's policies, the punishments. He wasn't in charge of any of that. He was directed on what to do and how to do it. This is also not true. The school came up with new ways to torture us all the fucking time, okay? And Paul had a direct result on those punishments. He was a family leader. He wasn't just a choral leader. The area in which Paul excelled was music. He was a gifted music instructor. It was one area that gave him confidence. Paul struggled with his weight. His true addiction was food, and he was often ridiculed and mocked behind his back by the students. Are you fucking joking me? Okay? That is the craziest shit I've ever fucking heard. We mocked him? Is that a joke? Crazy. by the choir gave him confidence, and he was hard on his students when they performed. If they were late for practice, sometimes he kicked them out of the choir. If they weren't sounding correctly, he would yell in their faces, scream, pull them aside. He was harsh on his students, and he looks back on that behavior today and he regrets it because he knows he was hard. And he was sometimes described as an over-the-top and pompous ass when it came to the choir. Minors, okay? Minors. The parents were victims as well. Sorry, y'all. I'm kind of ignoring the comments. Where was I? Paul met his wife while he was working at the Family Foundation, and they married. He married Diane in 1996, and she too worked at the school, and they lived together on a property in the home. They lived in a split-level house, and below was a dorm area where there were 16 beds. 16 girls lived below them. Okay. It was a small area. You're going to see that in during the course of the trial. They showed a lot of photos of the dorm down there. I just don't know how to get my hands on them. So I will ask students. I might be able to get them from students. Paul's greatest gift. I don't give a fuck what his greatest gift was. It blows my fucking mind. His greatest gift was music. I don't give a fuck. He abused children. The fuck? Who cares what his fucking greatest gift was? Wild. To make the members of his choir perform beyond the potential that they ever thought they had. And these kids that went to the school and performed at these performances, they performed in the North American Music Festival. They were in Toronto. They were in Myrtle Beach, DC, Virginia Beach. It wasn't just Paul in the choir. The entire school went. They had charter buses. This wasn't a trip that was for Paul and the choir. It was the entire school and faculty. Everybody went on these trips. That is true. When I was there, we went to Virginia Beach. That's where the festival was held when I was there. But over time, they went to different places. But some alumni have revised their actual experience at the school and substituted it with outrageous claims of abuse. The Family Foundation may not have been the right place for some of the students, that's true, but it certainly was for many. And like any rehabilitation facility, you're never going to have 100% success rates. It's just not going to happen. Number one, family was served a cease and desist from the DAAA. They were not to operate as a fucking treatment facility, and they fucking did it anyway. Okay? That's number one. Number two, there was zero therapy. None. Zero. All right? So how do you even say, okay, that some alumni were there at different times? A lot of us, the kids from the 90s aren't going to have the same story as the kid from the 2000s. It's just the way it was. But to say that outrageous claims of abuse is wild. Wild to me. Like, you could have done this without shaming the victims. You could have fucking defended him without invalidating what they actually fucking did. Do you want me to show the list of deceased students again? Some people are going to fall back into the same things that they were doing before they went to the program. They're going to go back into old habits that they were doing, and that's what's happened here. The Argyros and the Family Foundation school staff cared. They wanted to help these kids succeed. They put a lot of money into this facility, and they made a lot of money too. What was it? $7.5 million in 2004? $7.5 fucking million. The fuck? They wanted to help these kids succeed. They put a lot of money into this facility, and they wanted and they tried their best to make this normal high school experience for these kids and just not make it a rehabilitative center for these issues. Okay. Just like out of curiosity, um, I went through your tax records with somebody that knows a little bit more about that kind of stuff than I do, because I'm not really good at that type of stuff. But there's a little bit of it looks a little fraudulent. Okay. If you make $7.5 million and that's what comes in, and then automatically you pay out 7 million, how the fuck does that work? You ain't gonna tell me that you did not. Like, come on. You did not. Wild. I'm sorry, I lost my place. Bear with me. They had high school sports where they participated in sectional sports. They had journalism club where they worked on a yearbook. They had choir. They had theater. They had dance. They had jazz bands. They had all these activities because they did want to make this a wonderful experience. They took trips. You see that the notes on the side says they also made a shit ton of money and now own half of Hancock. That's true. They own the newspaper. Imagine that. They owned the movie theater, but I do believe that they did sell it. The reviews were terrible. And they do own the local inn. They own that as well. All money they made for abusing children. Tony would say that he was a pimp. They weren't fucking rich before they abused children. Okay. The fuck? We didn't take a lot of trips. We did go to like the music conferences. We also did like a Christmas shopping, but the later kids, the kids that came after, like in the early 2000s, they did family trips as like a family. They would go out to eat. We didn't do stuff like that. Okay. The students were permitted to have cameras. They could photograph anything they wanted. Bullshit. That is a flat out fucking lie. A lie. Complete and total lie. Okay. They could document it. And in fact, some did. And they do have many photographs of these trips. The family school wanted to provide this great experience. I'm sorry. The family school wanted to provide this great experience for the student, even though it was often risky that someone might run away. They all had to be well chaperoned, well organized, and inspirational because they had to make sure that the kids wouldn't run off. They didn't want to be there. The kids would run away, but they didn't run away on the trips. Who told you that? Because one of my very good friends ran away on a trip to New York. She left. Okay. Kids ran away from trips all the time. I don't know who told you that, but that is a lie. It was easier to run away on trips because you didn't have to trek through the fucking forest. Okay. Y'all, this is gonna. How did the revenge campaign start? It started in 2008 with an alum from the mid-1990s named Jonathan Martin Crawford. Can you fucking imagine? Can you imagine defaming a victim of the program that committed suicide because he felt guilty that he didn't do enough in your opening statement defending a fucking pedophile? No, it could never be me. It could never be me. He testified in front of Congress at a hearing about conditions at some of these schools. He was addressing physical abuse. He said he saw staff more than once punch a student. He said that there was psychological abuse and that there were self-proclaimed sex addicts at the school. There was never any allegation of sexual abuse during this congressional testimony. There didn't need to be. How do you know that victims didn't ask him to leave that out? Just wondering. Do we need to go back to the Family School Truth Campaign episode, where there's plenty of sexual abuse allegations there way before the CVA. Unfortunately, the bill failed, and it was a legitimate cause that he had for oversight at these facilities. It was a legitimate effort, but it failed, and he wasn't looking to close the school. But in 2019, after the bill failed, the harassment against the faculty really amped up. They started calling faculty members. They started calling the school. They started sabotaging the website. This is wild. They started posting negative reviews, and they started trying to dissuade parents from sending their kids to the school. Telling what that school did to us is leaving negative reviews. Telling our stories is leaving negative reviews. The school also closed in 2014, So I guess she doesn't have as much information as she thought she did. All right. When the bill failed, it prompted this all-out war against the faculty at the Family Foundation. Anything that could ruin the reputation of the school and destroy attendance, that's what they're doing. Wow. Those involved in the smear campaign amped up the harassment. They sabotaged the school website. They sent out a campaign of 4,000 letters to Delaware County asking people to call in tips if they knew anything about any type of abuse. Not a whisper of sex abuse allegations, not a whisper amongst all that noise. That's a lie. I already proved in one of the episodes, it might be the truth episode, that there was. And we talked about it while we were there. While we were there, there were allegations of sexual abuse. So I don't know, she's just lying? That's crazy to me. The hostility toward the foundation focused on the sanctions that were imposed on the students when they were at the school and the discussions during meal times called table topic. That's what they were complaining about, not sexual abuse. The Family Foundation's Truth Campaign is archived, and you could go to that site yourself using the Wayback Machine and see it for yourself. The school's been closed since 2014. It's there. Yes, there were sanctions and there were consequences for actions, and the students were required to do certain things when they arrived at the school. They had to eat everything on their plate. They had to eat what was served. They had to go to class. They had to do homework. They had to respect the staff. They had to respect their fellow students. There were sanctions. I'm sorry. I'm scrolling on my iPad and forgetting to scroll on your side. There were sanctions if they failed to abide by the rules. They couldn't smoke. They couldn't drink. They couldn't run off with members of the opposite sex. Those were all prohibited activities. These students were engaging in adult activities before they arrived at the school. We weren't being punished for breaking rules. Paul, again, was not in charge of the type of sanctions and how the sanctions were imposed. That is a fucking lie. He was told how to do it and when to do it. So he was told to abuse children, so he did. And you see, I wrote here, lie. He had direct influence. During this smear campaign, Paul was harassed. He lived right in Hancock, New York, after the school had to close in 2014. And that's when John Martin Crawford, the man who testified in front of Congress, wanted to call a truce, throw the white flag, wanted to call a truce. The school closed in 2014. That wasn't satisfactory to some of the alumni. No, the goal was achieved. The school was closed. I don't understand where she's going here. We wanted accountability. That's what we wanted. We wanted, instead of fucking Michael Giros to making a statement in the paper saying, we just want to move on. We want to move on. They have continued to deny, justify, rationalize what they did. They abused children. Direct quote from the judge, tantamount to torture. That wasn't good enough for them. They were out for blood. They wanted more. In 2015, John Martin Crawford, a year after the school closed, tragically killed himself. After that happened, another alumni took center stage, and she was engaging in the all-out war against Family Foundation. Her name was Liz Ianellis. She threw gas on a smoldering fire, and it lit an inferno that started to burn out of control. Trial isn't about Liz Ianellis. I don't know if she knew that. It wasn't about Liz Ianellis. Like any institution, practices evolve and changed over time. So the family school changed their protocol. So early on, there wasn't a sanction that required students to be wrapped in blankets or put in a quiet room. That was for students that got out of control, that were either a threat to themselves or others, and they had to somehow restrain them. This is not true. Not true. This is also, you see me say, this is the first time I ever heard them admit to the blankets with duct tape. Okay? You see at the top, lie. I was restrained for being non-compliant at a table topic. And wrapped in a blanket with duct tape and put in a fucking boiler room for 5 days. The first time. Imagine something like that happening more than fucking once. And it was because I wouldn't admit to something I didn't fucking do. In the 1990s, they were wrapping students in blankets temporarily until they calmed down. They weren't left in a blanket for days or weeks. There were sanctions. There were work sanctions. If someone failed to do what they were supposed to do, they were put on a work sanction. They had to do manual labor. They had to shovel snow. They had to construct things that they were building, including the chapel. They put them to work to do things around the school as a way to show there are consequences for failing to abide by the rules. That was true. That's not true. The fuck? People will put on work sanctions because they were slow or lazy. The fuck? Now the practices evolved because in 1999, see, she admits it. The state came in and did an inspection and looked at the restraint policy and said, well, you're not injuring students, but there's a better approach. A quiet room would be better. They immediately changed to a quiet room. And after 1991, not one student was ever wrapped up as a restraint. They used the quiet room as they were instructed. Bullshit. It was the building of the new school. Did they get investigated? Yes. Were those claims that were made in the investigations? Yes. But it was the new school is when that changed, right? And you see me say at the bottom, what about the prior investigations? Did she just not read them? This school was investigated the entire time that it was open. The entire time. This is not new information. I'm sorry. They also went to Cornell and sent 2 staff members to learn about therapeutic crisis intervention. They trained 2 staff members on the TCI who came back and trained the rest of the staff. Maybe that should have been done first. I don't know. Call me crazy. Maybe this should have been done, and maybe they should have been trained in doing this type of crisis intervention before they opened a fucking program for at-risk teens. No, that doesn't make any sense. That doesn't seem like the logical way to do it, because it does to me. I'm sorry. Every year they were restrained and updated on ways in which to de-escalate situations that might erupt during the course of the day at the school because the faculty wasn't armed. Imagine that. There was no security for the faculty. They didn't even carry pepper spray. Many of the students were larger than these staff members. And again, they came to the school with some serious problems. You're missing something, Ms. Peebles. We were afraid. No, we were children. They didn't need fucking weapons. They used food. Now, when Liz Ianellis took over this smear campaign and poured gas on a fire, she made it clear that it wasn't over for her. And I quote, I'm going to run them through the fucking wall. She was out for blood and she was recruiting people on social media. She orchestrated this war. She went on a rant on public media and said, we shaved and creamed their houses, we egged their cars, we were throwing Roman candles out of our car car windows. So you see, social media was increasing during this time, right? You figure 2014, right? Facebook came out in 2007. So social media was just growing. And as that grew and we started talking more, but that's what it was. It had nothing to do with the shit that she's talking about. And they played a clip from the Troubled podcast where it's Liz Ianellis, Miranda, who is the host of the Troubled podcast, and I believe one of the victims, right? It might be on the playlist that I have for the Family Foundation School. They played a clip during this trial where Liz had just filed her lawsuit and she is encouraging other victims to come forward. She could have gone as a Jane Doe, okay? She chose to use her name, hoping that other victims would come forward because she did. You know what I'm saying? The way that they twisted that entire conversation was fucking wild to me. It was wild to me. And I was sitting in the courtroom going, what the fuck? Because this is just who Liz is. She's just doing what she's done for veterans and trauma victims for her own community. That, like, there was no difference here. You know what I'm saying? And it was incredibly frustrating to watch them try to pin our reactions to their abuse on one person. That's crazy. If anybody is to blame, it was the facility, not the fucking students. Okay. It was same types of behavior they were engaging in that got them to the school to begin with. They were continuing to do the same things they did when they left the school. Again, even during that time period, there wasn't a whisper about sex abuse allegations, not even during all that noise. That's not true. And the Family Foundation, the Family School Truth Campaign proves that that's not true. I guess Ms. Peebles didn't know that. Why isn't this playing? I'm sorry, y'all. Bear with me. What happened? What happened? Why isn't this playing? Bear with me a second. It's like, there we go. Hold on. I'm going to have to go get it again. Bear with me. I'm going to stop and restart the screen sharing so that hopefully it picks it back up. Bear with me. I'm so like technologically challenged. It's sad. No, it doesn't. Why? All right, let me do this. Hold on, y'all. Bear with me a second. Go back. I'm going to restart it on page 26. Just bear with me a second. Oh, page 26. No. 22. I'm almost done with it. And I was going to go into the next one, but I'm not going to. I'm going to take a break in between. Why is it doing this? Hold on, y'all. I'm trying. Bear with me a sec. Maybe if I do it this way. Hold on, y'all. I think I got it. I just have to reshare it. I can post these so that y'all can read them after I get it. Like, because I have it saved. I'm sorry. I have it saved as what's it called? On private. I can post them. I can unprivate them after we're done. My stomach is growling. You hear it? I'm hungry. I'm gonna eat as soon as I'm done. All right. So hold on. Now we got it. We got it back. All right. I let them. I don't know that this is one that you'll want to sit in because it's really it's not easy to listen to, you know, and I understand that. I understand that it's a lot. So just bear with me and let me get this situated. Where was I? Okay. Liz Ianelli began engaging in extensive self-promotion campaign. How did she orchestrate this witch hunt? It started in 2017 when on social media she got a direct message from victim 2. She had never met her before. What? Does that even sound appropriate? Okay. Crazy. They weren't even at the school at the same time. Liz Ianelli immediately called her. We do this. You understand that, right, Ms. Peebles? If there is a student that is asking for support or help, we do that regardless of the fact or if we were there together or not. That's what we do for each other. Do you want me to show you again the list of the 150 something kids that aren't here anymore? It's wild. Victim 2 wanted to join forces with Liz Ianelli to go after the faculty at the school. During a conversation between the two, allegations of sex abuse surfaced. So this is how crazy this is. Why didn't Liz Ianelli file on Paul? If this is such a big conspiracy theory, right? Why did Liz Ianelli, when she filed her lawsuit, why did she not name Paul as an abuser? But I guess they didn't think about that, you know? Liz Ianelli said the cook at the school abused her. Liz Ianelli arranged for victim 2 to be interviewed by the FBI. Victim 2 didn't go to law enforcement. You're going to see that this isn't correct either once we get to the testimony. Okay. Liz Ianelli reached out to the FBI and arranged a meeting for victim 2 to talk to the FBI. Now, this is the first time there were any sex abuse allegations even listed about Paul Geer. I don't even know how they say something like that with a straight face because it's a bold-faced fucking lie. Okay. Victim 2 sits down with the FBI and they talk to her at length. 2 FBI agents sit down with her and they take extensive notes. During that interview, victim 2 claimed that Paul Geer sexually abused her on the school property, and she pointed out that there were 2 other places in her dorm and in a barn where the choir practiced. She was specifically asked, oh, you took trips? Anything ever happened on those trips? Nope, this is also false, and you'll see it in the testimony. After she interviewed with the FBI in 2017, nothing happens. She leaves. They take notes. I'm almost done with it. There's like 4 pages left, not even 8. Nothing happens. Liz Ianelli then makes a phone call to Geer. She wants to interview him. This is actually in Liz's documentary. Paul agrees. Paul's willing to sit down and meet with Liz Ianelli. She wants to talk to him. So he meets with Liz Ianelli. He doesn't know that she's recording him, but she did. And it is in the documentary. Also, 2017 is before the CVA. All right. When New York opened that statute of limitations, that is when all the civil suits came down. And once the civil suits were being settled, if you will, that attorney, the attorney that handled a lot of them, Ralph D. Simone, he went to the FBI with the facts of the trips. Okay. So it's fucking weird that she says FBI in 2017, but doesn't understand that the CVA changed everything for us. He's talking to her and he's apologetic. He said, yes, I was a monster. I feel bad. He wants to provide relief for how he talked to some of his students. And she confronts him about allegations of sex abuse, and he flat out denies him, and she leaves disappointed. She didn't get what she wanted. She leaves, and then a month or 2 later, she calls Delaware County Sheriff's Department and makes arrangements for victim 2 to be interviewed with the Delaware County Sheriff's Department. That's it. That interview was videotaped, but you're not going to see it because somehow it got lost. I know it's a big conspiracy. Hi, baby blue eyes. I'm almost done, but I'll keep it up. She tells the sheriff's deputy with Liz Ianelli is also with her that Paul Geer sexually abused her on the property at Hancock. Does that mean that he didn't also abuse her somewhere else? I guess so. I guess so. They do their investigation, case closed, hear nothing. That's not true either. You'll see in testimony. Liz Ianelli isn't going to stop. She called the FBI 100 times. She called Delaware County over and over. And then in 2018, Liz Ianelli makes the front page of the New York Times in an article that was written about the Family Foundation School. This is infuriating. This is in September of 2018. They're talking about how the number of students had died. About 100 students had passed, alumni. Thousands of kids went to the Family Foundation School in Hancock, and the individuals that were dead either had some committed suicide, some overdosed, some were of natural causes, and some was accidents. Natural causes. The oldest of us is in what? Their 50s? It was a variety of reasons why these individuals died, but they highlighted it and they mentioned allegations of sexual abuse in the article by victim 2. So was it mentioned or was it not mentioned? I don't know. You're kind of giving me some mixed signals here, That caught the attention of personal injury attorney that practiced out of New York City named Ralph DeSimone. He reached out to Liz Ianelli and rolled out the red carpet. He wanted to talk to her about these allegations. During this meeting with the personal injury attorney, Liz Ianelli was describing psychological abuse that she suffered at the school and all sorts of other types of mental trauma that they believed that they should be compensated for. There were no avenue available for them to pursue those types of claims. The statute of limitation had long run. That's true. These claims were from 1993 to 2000, 2001. They're too old. There was no avenue for any type of relief. However, Ralph DeSimone was acutely aware of the Crime Victims Act that was pending at the time. That was inevitable, that was going to pass regarding claims of sexual abuse. And that act, in fact, passed in January of 2019. That allowed and opened a 1-year window for people to file lawsuits for old claims of sexual abuse. That is when Liz Ianelli and DeSimone jumped into action. It's wild that they're so far in conspiracy theory land. Victim 1 learned about the article and saw it on social media. Liz Ianelli is recruiting people, begging people to come forward on social media. Victim 2 meets with the FBI in 2018. Encouraging victims to come forward does not mean that she was recruiting anybody. That's just crazy. You're going to hear that he went to Maine with Paul Geer. That's true. At the time, Paul was 26, victim 1 was 15, almost 16. He was about ready to leave the school. Victim 1, did well at the school, and Paul Geer had taught victim 1. He was in the choir, he was in the theater, and he did well at the school. He wasn't even there a year. And was getting ready to leave, and Paul took him to Maine to do outdoor activities, which they did, and brought him back to the school, and then he went home. Victim 1 went home almost immediately. Paul Geer didn't have control over victim 1 when they came back from Maine. After the CVA passed, Liz Ianelli takes victim 2 and victim 3 and herself to Ralph DeSimone's office, and the three of them file sexual abuse allegations. 2 of them filed against Paul Geer, and Liz Ianelli filed against the cook at the school. If it's all this big lie, why wouldn't Liz have filed on Paul? I guess Ms. Peebles didn't think about that. I don't know, super weird. That opened the floodgates. Other alumni started making allegations of sexual abuse, and it wasn't just against Paul Geer and the cook. Wow, imagine that. Ain't that strange? There were multiple, at least 6 other faculty members, maybe 7, that there were allegations of sexual abuse brought, and the complaints mirror each other. This is, it's crazy that she even says this. We were starved. We got a can of tuna. We were put in a blanket. We were forced to do work sanctions, and all of it mirrors. Each lawsuit mirrors each other. And then the insurance companies started throwing money at these lawsuits. Couldn't be that we all went to the same program, right? It couldn't be that some sanctions were more common than others. So many students got to experience those same sanctions, right? Wild. Crazy. The insurance company, the family foundation, doesn't admit any wrongdoing, and these cases settle. Oh, wait, did I change it? I'm sorry. That emboldens these individuals, and they're still not satisfied. They're out for blood. The money wasn't enough. They wanted them charged criminally, especially Paul Geer. Of course we want them charged criminally. They fucking abused us. Liz Ianellis, during this entire time, has become a social diva. What? Clearly, you know nothing about Liz Ianellis. She was in the middle of doing a documentary shortly after John Martin Crawford died. She's doing a documentary about herself and her time at the Family Foundation. She wrote a book about her time there. She's all over podcasts. She's providing advice to people. She's telling them how to bring the civil suits. All of this she was promoting. She was also self-promoting. She was selling merchandise about herself, sketches of herself wrapped in a blanket, and selling t-shirts and keychains and journals and sweatshirts. And she appeared on talk shows. Liz didn't make a penny off of the items that she sold. Every single bit of it went back to survivors, just so everybody understands. Paul Geer was deposed during one of these civil cases. That means he was sworn under oath to tell the truth. Does that mean he fucking did? Does that mean he did? Paul Geer, and you're going to see it, Paul Geer couldn't have been more deferential and respectful during the questions that were being asked of him during that time. He said, yes, I took victim one to Maine. And in hindsight, he thinks about it. And of course, now he thinks in hindsight it was a bad idea of he's being accused of having sexually abused him. And nowadays, I think we all would say it's not a good idea. He was candid about what he did and apologetic, and he used Liz Ianellis' word to describe himself. Yes, I was a monster, and I used sexually charged language, and we shouldn't have, because part of what they were exposing at the family school was this idea of purity. Again, Paul was doing what he was instructed to do by the owner, the founder of the school. Abused children. Wild. So the FBI reopens their case in 2021 after Ralph DeSimone reaches out and implores them to pursue this criminally. Okay. So it's Liz Ianellis and the civil attorney that pushed the FBI to charge Paul Geer criminally in this case. And then we have our third victim. Enter victim 3. His name was provided by Liz Ianellis. The FBI reaches out to victim 3. He's off by a decade, even when he was at the school. And his version of what happened in February of 2022 is vastly different from what he says 8 months later after they sit down with him. He was late to the party for filing a civil case because there was a 1-year window that closed, even though they extended it because of the pandemic. Ianellis recruits. She's the nucleus and is on the outside. Victim 1, I'm sorry, these are other victims. 2 additional female alumni who claim Paul Geer sexually abused them also filed civil suits, and you will hear from them. They're seeking money damages. Just like really quickly, did they get paid to abuse us? So why is it so wrong that they want compensation for the abuse since they can't? There is no criminal avenue. Accountability, right? Isn't that what they tried to drill into our heads? But now they just want to fucking escape it. The government is going to present this grooming expert to talk about how people in ingratiate to themselves, to caregivers, and to try to get close to children and provide them with candy and favors in order to gain that trust and take advantage of them and give an opportunity to be with them. Coercion, right? That's what 3 of the charges were. That's not what you have here. We don't have that in this case. We have teenagers who were street smart and savvy and engaged in adult vices before they even came to the school. These are not young children who were groomed by Paul Geer. And you see me, right? Food is a motivator. Food being used as a means of coercion could most likely be one of the most powerful motivators, actually. None of you will require an expert testimony to decide this case and understand what really happened here. The government's expert offers common sense knowledge that we all have. Do we, Ms. Peebles? I don't think you do, because this is terrible. There have been a great deal of hysteria surrounding the allegations against Paul Geer. It's easy to become rageful and disgusted when you hear the allegations, but you're here today and the rest of the week and next week to decide what is fact versus what is fiction. The devil is always in the details. The alumni that are testifying against Paul are all part of this Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, social media frenzy that have been trashing the schools since the smear campaign began. Those folks have abandoned their own personal experience, what they actually experienced at the school, for a revised historical version that's been created by hateful, money-driven motives. It's time to douse this malicious inferno once and for all. At the end of this trial, you're going to have the power to do just that by finding Paul Geer not guilty. That didn't work out very well, huh? I don't think that worked out very well because he was convicted. Another thing that I wanted to share, and then I'll go, my phone, is the property. I want people, because this comes up a lot, and I'm going to try to find some more detailed like photos, but I'm going to have to probably ask students if they have them. This is the barn. Hold on. Did I stop screen sharing? I'm sorry. This is the barn. Bear with me. Where victim 2 was assaulted. Okay. I just want people to understand, and a lot of it is going to be difficult. So I'm going to try to get as much as I can so that I could provide context, right? This is the barn, and this is located next to the ponds and kind of in front of where the school was. When I was there, there was only one building. That new building was not there yet. The other one I put on private. Hold on, bear with me a second, and then I'll go because I am hungry. I haven't really been eating because I've been sick, Hold on. And I'm sorry, I ignored the comments a lot because I can't do 2 things at once. Like I can't focus the way that I used to really well. Bear with me. And like multitask. Can I make this bigger? There we go. Let me go back. Oh, pause it. Okay. Share this tab instead. There we go. Okay. This is the property of the family. All right. So you see the building with the red roof, right? To the right, the bigger one, that was not there when I was a student there. All right. That didn't exist. The one to your left was all we had as far as the school goes. The school was in this building. Dining rooms were in this building. These 2 ponds were here. There was no pool. And right in the middle of the schools is the fucking pedophile house. Okay. So I'm going to zoom in a bit just so that there's the barn. The one that is kind of next to the pool, that's the barn. All right. Then if you go up, all right, staff lived on property. Okay. When I was there, Tom and Mary Musgrove, they lived here. Tom actually wound up relapsing. Mary was my biology teacher and my family leader, and she fucking hated me. Okay. This was Bob and Susan Runge's house. Right there. Okay. Now, when I was there, these courts weren't here. All right. This is the pedophile's house. Okay. And then you'll see, like on the top right there, you're going to see that there looks like the grass has been worn down. That's where the trailers were that we lived in when I was there. They did build a dorm after the fact, but see, you see trailers were here. Up this Serenity Lane was the chapel that the students fucking built. And that's important because Liz Ianellis, they tried to impeach her in the testimony, but you're going to see why it doesn't matter. Okay. This was a daycare in Tony and Betty's house. All right. Now here we go. There's the chapel, right? This was daycare for the kids and Mike's house at the time. Now watch when we pan out. Look at what's around. Okay. So when we ran away, all right, we had to get through. You see up here, this is Route 97. At the very, very top, that's Route 97. That's not very close, right? So it's now, well, the family school is now French Woods, right? So when we ran away, we had to, there's probably, I think they said it was 100 and something acres. I don't know for sure, but this was not very close. When we ran away, we had to go through all this and get to 97. And then I personally, when I left, I hitchhiked. I was not letting them catch me, right? But that's just so you have some context on like what the property actually looked like. It was not small in any stretch of the word. You could look it up if you want to. It still will come up, but that's all it is woods. That's all it is. And the property is huge. So when there was any kinds of snowstorm and all of that shit, it was the students that were on work sanctions that did that work. It was not the staff. We didn't have fucking snow blowers. It was the students that were being punished. And I meant to say this earlier. One of the things with we lived in trailers when I was there. When I got there, he lived above the female dorm. They moved it, but a lot of the problem, and that's why they don't understand that like food was a means of coercion, because a lot of the problem was a lot of us were on these like really demanding high energy work sanctions, right? And we were teenagers. We didn't have the sustenance. We weren't getting the calorie intake to sustain our bodies at that point in time. Oh yeah, students built everything. The students built the chapel. The students, oh yeah, it's slave labor. That's exactly what they did. And even down to as far as like the staff, right? A lot of the things that should have been staff jobs, right? Senior members did, right? Like recording monitoring our phone calls. Senior members did that. Monitoring our letters and making us rewrite them. A lot of times it was senior members. Senior members did the restraining. Senior members, when we ran away, senior members were sent out with the dogs to chase us, right? So they were they had people that were not certified to be teachers or educators in any fucking way, shape, or form. A lot of them, excuse me, teaching us. So they were cutting corners there because they weren't paying them that salary. And then they had senior members doing a lot and the work, the dish crew, the cooking, it was all done by students, all of it. So when you got punished, that's what, like, the work sanctions were generally stuff like that. Oh yeah, very secluded. As a matter of fact, after Paul was arrested, I wonder if I have it in Dropbox. After Paul was arrested, we were talking about it on the Trouble Teen subreddit, and somebody messaged me and said, I live next to that place. I always knew something weird was going on there. I can't believe that this is it, because a lot of the town, the Ojeros were not, they were respected members of the town. We were terrified. They thought that we were like hardened criminals. It really was, it's just been a crazy experience, honestly. I wonder if that picture is the bad guy. The picture, my avatar is John Martin Crawford. Yeah, intentionally secluded. Um, I really wish that he was here to see how far we got, because we never fucking thought that we'd get any of them. While we were at the trial, we were told that the other ones that we would have preferred be charged had turned state witness. So I guess that means we'll never see accountability from them, and that sucks. But like, you think at the very least you could, like, I couldn't live with myself if I knew that this business, because that's what it was, right? If this business that I was in charge of has fucking destroyed, the ripple effect is truly insane. The damage that comes from this one fucking place is truly, it's unimaginable. There is not enough, there's no way to measure it, his wife testifies. His wife testifies. We got to see a whole full frontal. Okay. Yeah, it was, we were, the students that were in, the courtroom, we were like, oh my God. It was crazy. And they did that thinking that it was gonna, they did it for no reason, because it didn't make a difference. He was convicted anyway. I agree, Florida Gray. There are certain staff that I would rather over others, and I think that that's something that people don't necessarily understand too, is that staff played favorites, right? What was a terrible staff member to me may not have been a terrible staff member to somebody else, and that it was a very important part of how the school operated as well. Hi. Because it's like staff had, they had their favorites. Like, there's no way around that. I just don't understand how I would never be able to live with myself. That's just me. I was talking to somebody about this the other day, and I said, like, I can't imagine going to work on my first day, right? And them telling me, oh, you got to go wrap that kid in a blanket with duct tape. And I would look at them like, are you fucking crazy? And I would immediately leave and report it, and these people, they just make excuses. It's crazy. Yeah, the judge had, I might have it in Dropbox. The witness statements, the judge read them. Oh, I'm sorry. So a lot of us, the staff, it comes up in testimony that the FBI opens a tip line, and they got over 100. Yes. Wait, what? Why did it rewrite me? I'm sorry. They got over 100 statements from students regarding Paul, and that there were also new victims, but it sucks. It's just the way, just my personal opinion. I don't think that the statute of limitations is long enough. I think that that there should be a longer, like, it needs to be longer. Because especially in cases like this, where institutionalized child abuse is there, because we didn't have a choice, and they, oh, I'm sorry, I'm doing something on the screen. Hold on. And we were not right. The statute of limitations on sexual assault or most anyway, is 5 years. And we were not right 5 years out, y'all. Like a lot of us really struggled with social, like because we were fucking awkward. Like the situation that we just came from was fucking weird. You know, I'm trying to make this bigger. Here we go. Maybe I could do this. There we go. Right. And we were not prepared to deal with it in any way, shape, or form. And by the time we were, the statute of limitations was over. There wasn't anything that we could really do. And don't get me wrong, I'm grateful for the CBA, right? Because that's what made any of this possible. But unfortunately, it sucks. I don't think, and I agree, Florida Gray. I agree. This was like, this judge was so fair, y'all. Like she allowed things that she probably shouldn't have, right? But she knew what she was doing. And we sent victim impact statements to the judge like prior to sentencing. But this is just me thanking them for stuff. Hold on, I'm trying to scroll down. It might be easier for me to read it to you. This is just me thanking the court for making an exception to let me hear virtually, because I was devastated. When they told me that I couldn't fly, I was fucking devastated. And I was grateful that they allowed me to do that. It says, I was sent to the family school at 16 and was placed into Family One, which at the time was run by Paul Geer and Robin Ducey, and where I remained for about a year. The one thing that remains consistent for the entirety of my stay at the school was Paul's sadistic punishments and the lengths that he would go to impose his power upon us. Sadly, for many students, that control also included sexual abuse. I won't waste your time trying to explain it all, as I am sure that you have a basic understanding of what life was. Hold on, let me flip to the second one. Oh, my bad. Open. Why did I do it this way? Of understanding of what life was like at the Family Foundation School from trial proceedings. What I will say, however, is at a time when I would have benefited from direction and reassurance, I was given the exact opposite from the family school, and specifically Paul Geer. Paul forced me to eat foods that I was allergic to, punished me by putting me in the boiler room for days, wrapped in a blanket with duct tape, and without the use of the restroom for any reason. He methodically tried to strip me of any old image or self-respect that I had by yelling derogatory terms at me, sometimes standing directly in front of me and screaming in my face. He used my past traumas to publicly humiliate me, and I still struggle with public speaking well into my 40s. There was no individualized therapy. There was no trauma work or structured groups, only tearing us apart and leaving us the responsibility of putting ourselves back together. Adding to the cruelty was the fact that my own mother unknowingly paid them thousands of dollars to abuse me. The first days, it's like you're in a fishbowl, just observing your environment. I had my first serious interaction with Paul Geer 3 days in. He yelled obscenities at me simply because I was talking to a boy in another family. That boy is actually a victim of sexual assault by Paul Geer. He put me on blackout with boys, and I remained on blackout the entirety of my stay. The fact that I was restricted from talking to boys at my age at a time where I should have been learning healthy boundaries with the opposite sex had significant results far into my adult. Hold on, y'all. No, that's not right. That's my... This is it. Sorry. I opened the statement for when he got arrested. I had significant results far into my adult life. I sought comfort in highly toxic and verbally abusive relationships because that is what I was used to. Things changed day to day at the family school. Let me make this bigger. But one of the constants I remember was Paul Geer's temperament. He was an awkward man. I knew that the highly sexual conversations he had with minors was highly inappropriate, but he was beyond reproach. I tried to talk to my therapist about it, but blame would always be pointed back to me with what did I do to make him talk to me like that? There is never a time that an adult should be elaborating on their sexual habits in a room full of minors, and there is no excuse for it. It was excused because it was Paul Geer. the musical genius who was one of the school's big moneymakers. The school needed his chorus to keep parents, wanting to send their kids to the family. Therefore, how Paul treated us was not important. The Ogeros gave him a position of power and then did nothing to stop him as he abused us simply because they needed the revenue that his chorus brought in. He was given free rein to do as he pleased, and I'm so glad that he is being told no by this court. As an adult, I understand that Paul's inadequacies were a major factor in the way that he treated us. Unfortunately, his actions have caused thousands of children harm, ruined countless families, and we have lost many alumni due to the torment that we've endured at Paul Geer's hands, and for that, he should be held accountable. The 18 months that I spent at the family has shaped my life in more ways than I can count. Hold on, I got to go back to 4. Sorry. Oh, I keep pulling up the first statement. I'm sorry. Oh, shit. I did it again. Hold on. Why is this not letting me scroll down? I apologize, y'all. Let me do this. Let me not, because then everything will come up. Hold on. The 18 months that I spent at the family has shaped my life in more ways than I can count. I swear that the excessive time that I spent in the corner where Paul put me is a major factor in the back problems that started shortly after leaving the family and continues to this day. The family school, and Paul Geer specifically, was a factor in my diagnosis of PTSD, the effects of which I have struggled with for many years. I sought comfort in substances until I was able to get the proper therapy to cope with the trauma that I endured while at the family. Decades of nightmares, panic attacks, low self-esteem, and abusive relationships can all be traced directly back to Paul Geer. He may not have abused me sexually, but the damage caused to my psyche is forever. Whether we were troubled teens or not, it did not give them the right to abuse and hurt us even more. I dislike the term troubled teens because with a little bit of guidance and the appropriate therapy, we could have healed years ago. If the true goal of the family was trying to heal us, they failed. Instead of trying to help, Paul used it to his advantage. He hid his control under the troubled teen theory. No one would believe us. They would not listen. Instead of honoring his oath as a mandated reporter, Paul made a choice, and he chose to inflict more harm. I hope that this court considers exactly that. The fact that Paul could have blown the whistle on the abuse at the family school a month after he started working there back in the early 90s. He did not. He chose to inflict as much pain on us as he could because of his own insecurities and unhealed trauma. His excuse during the trial of having endured his own sexual abuse is no excuse for him going from a victim to a perpetrator. I pray that this court delivers the maximum sentence allowed according to the guidelines, because that is what Paul Geer deserves. I shiver at the thought of him being released to potentially hurt more children. Sorry, I got to get to the next one. And make no mistake, that is exactly what he would do. I understand that due to the statute of limitations, I understand that due to the statute of limitations, Paul could not be charged with other sexual assaults that may have been disclosed and given to the FBI. I understand that they cannot be used against him because he is not convicted of them, but there is a pattern. Paul Geer abused us because he could, because he was allowed to. It's time for Paul to feel as he made us feel, powerless. I appreciate all that the court has done for us. There are no words for me to adequately explain to you just how much this means to us. 30 years later, those troubled teens who are always called liars and invalidated in order to protect the reputations of Paul Geer and the family school. You all hurt us, and I cannot thank you enough. For decades, what we endured by Paul was swept under the rug, and to everyone involved that made justice possible, from the bottom of my heart, thank you. And on that note, I hope that y'all have a good night. I appreciate y'all. I just want to make sure that I get, there's the next day was hearing, and it was parents. And I want to make sure that I'm have like double, tripled checked. I don't want to ever intentionally put anybody's information out. Um, what? Okay. I'm sorry. I got a text message and I'll have to deal with it when I end. I hope that everybody has a good night. I appreciate y'all. And I will see y'all soon.